I hope you have slept well after our class on Sartre. And although some insomnia would be in order, grave despair and severe depressions would be too much. Because mind you, Sartre insisted that existentialism is a humanism, true humanism even. And final words of the pamphlet, Existentialism is a humanism, it is a optimism. It is a positive answer to nihilism. That is what Sartre's work is all about. Considered from the nihilism, which is our current human condition, freedom means that we are condemned to be free. Freedom, taken seriously, means that there is no bargaining possible. The world is jam-packed with nothingnesses, and we can add new nothingnesses over and over again. We are condemned to this intentionality, according to Sartre. There's no bargaining, no escapes, no refuge in the they or in bad faith. Bad faith means using the freedom that you are to deny this freedom, to find excuses, mitigating circumstances, not realizing that it is us who call these circumstances mitigating. That is our responsibility, our freedom. So we are responsible for labeling these circumstances as mitigating, as we are responsible for the way we label anything. Sartre urges us to take our responsibility really serious. We should turn every state of affairs, so the objective way that things are according to the they, to science or whatever, to a situation of individual choice and responsibility. Sartre writes crude words. Everything that happens to me is mine. There are no accidents in life. That sounds very weird. There are no accidents in life. What Sartre means is that it is up to us to say when we are in an accident, state of affairs. Accidents happen. Why me? Or this must be a punishment for all I've done. Or I am a victim. Or, also possible, embracing Nietzsche's famous words, what does not kill me makes me stronger. I know many people who had a terrible accident in their life and eventually interpreted it as a life-changing moment, also in a positive sense. This is what Sartre means when he says there are no accidents in life. It is up to us to interpret these happenings, to say what they mean to us. Then there is Sartre's extreme, but he would say, I'm just doing phenomenology, I'm just describing what shows itself, his extreme take on intersubjectivity. Some might say this is a deeper truth that Sartre addresses. Some might say this is just one ontological dimension of intersubjectivity. We will come to that in the class on Levinas. Sartre says we are constantly reducing the other to objects of our interpretation, objects of our perceptions. Now, Sartre addressed this in a very personal, individualistic sense. But after Sartre, this phenomena of the gaze, the regard, the look in which you reduce the other, has been very fruitfully elaborated on in, for instance, critical theory, feminist theory, the male gaze, or the white gaze, or the imperial gaze, of the colonial gaze. But also Foucault has made very, very good sociological studies on the medical gaze. The way that you are when you enter a hospital, you're reduced to a patient. He examined the penitentiary system, where the gaze in the panopticum, you don't even need a guard. As long as all the prisoners have the idea that someone is looking at them, they will behave. So the gaze is something, a phenomena that Sartre has addressed, and no matter how crude we may think it is indeed something to really keep on thinking about, How often don't you do this? Reducing the other and others to your own perceptions without questioning your own presuppositions, without challenging your own presuppositions. There's a lot of tasks to be done there in the future. So Sartre is not that crude. It's important to let Sartre whisper in your ear all your life, not scream in your ear, then you'll go mad. Just whisper.
Welcome back to First Philosophy. I'm Sonja Schwitz.
I'm Cas Molenaar.
And we're back to Heidegger.
Finally.
Rejoice.
Finally back to Heidegger. It only took us 2 episodes.
2 episodes, yeah. It's been a long time, but finally we're back to familiar ground. This time it's going to be a different Heidegger.
Yeah, it will be a very different Heidegger.
Mm-hmm.
Still rooted in the same soil.
I'd hope so.
But it is interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah.
Let's not say too much about it. Let's just have it unwind as it is.
Yeah. As one of the more influential lyricists of our time has once asked, do you believe in life after being in time? And Heidegger sure did. And
fuck. No, yeah, he definitely did. Jesus.
Yeah, and we will see, because it was such an ambitious project. It was a gigantic one, really.
Yeah.
But as Awee will explain, he's had a turn.
The famous kera.
Mm-hmm. Into thinking really a lot about technology.
And if this is your first encounter with philosophy and you've listened to the Heidegger episodes, and you're kind of worried that it is again all about being and the structure of Dasein, this Heidegger that you will be introduced to is the Heidegger that is hugely influential on the philosophy of technology and the eco-philosophy in general. This is a really interesting and really new approach that you're going to see. So if you've listened to the past episodes, you're kind of hesitant going in, this will be definitely something different and I think magnificent.
Yeah. And one more philosopher got name dropped in the intro, of course, the Foucault, whose name everybody, I presume almost everybody has heard. If there's one philosopher you probably have heard of. I kind of think it's Foucault. I don't know. I think it's had a very big influence. We're not going to say much about it, but as always, encourage you to read it. Beware of falling into a trap of reading the history of madness and deciding that psychology is a hoax to control everyone. That's not what Foucault was trying to say, I believe.
Which has often been misunderstood by too eager first-year bachelor students.
Yeah.
But the history of madness is specifically a book that I would generally really recommend. Because when it ties into what the medical gaze was, and it just the sense that you can view madness very differently than and also not medically or not like medically set is something that is very important and very, very interesting to engage with.
Yeah, and this is also very much a Chekhov's gun on something that will come up. As we already were alluding, how the gaze is quite important for Awee's practice of philosophy specifically. So once again, something to look forward to.
But for now, that's us. let's turn to Awee and let's turn to our turns Heidegger.
Yeah.
So today's class is, well, in Sartrean terms, it may be depicted as an exploration in the technological and framing gaze. It's dedicated to Heidegger after Being and Time. So we will address the notorious and much discussed turn, the kere, in Heidegger's path of thinking. In Being and Time, Heidegger rethought the history of Western philosophy as a perpetual forgetfulness of being. And he launched his existential analytics, focusing on the being of Dasein, the being of individual existence as a throne project. So Being and Time addresses the temporality of our being in the world. Now, the turn in Heidegger's thinking entails addressing the temporality of being itself, which was the original plan of Being and Time, which Heidegger did not come to in this book. But mind you, the question of being may be the oldest, but it is also the most difficult question in the history of Western thought. As I mentioned earlier, Hegel called being the most general concept, the indeterminable immediate, because everything being is, every being is, but that is so vague, and Hegel says you can't really say anything more about it. But Heidegger says that because it is such an obscure concept, it asks for us our most scrutinous attention. But indeed, there is a severe difficulty in thinking about general concepts and, well, especially thinking about being. In one of his lectures, Heidegger quotes a wonderful anecdote by Hegel. A man walks into a greengrocer's shop and he asks for fruit. Well, my good man, the greengrocer replies, you've come to the right place. What do you want? Apples, pears, cherries, grapes, bananas, you name it. No, the man replies. I want to buy fruit. Now, I hope you get the gist and drift of this anecdote. There is, Hegel shows, no such thing as fruit. Nowhere on the greengrocer's shelves is fruit. Now, fruit, no matter how abstract it may be, it still refers to certain beings. But it's even a much more difficult predicament when it comes to being, because being is not. Being is not something. Being is the occurrence, the event, the happening, the eventuality of beings, the Ereignis, the happenness in my terms. We earlier addressed this as the ontological difference, Heidegger's most crucial discovery, perhaps. In Being and Time, Heidegger approaches the question of being through an exposé of Dasein and the pre-ontological understanding of being that we all have in everyday experience. The sky is blue, today is Thursday, etc. This was a revolutionary approach, starting off from everyday experience, but not without grave difficulties, and one of the reasons why the project of Being and Time was aborted by Heidegger. He just stopped writing it. Only the first half was published. Enough, however, to stir up the landscape of philosophy. But still, why did Heidegger change his way of thinking? What caused the turn, the kere, in his thinking? Existential analytics still appears to be a contribution to philosophical anthropology. It doesn't want to be, but it appears to be such. Heidegger is describing the enduring structures of human existence. Enduring structures. He uses the word enduring. So he doesn't use the word essential, which means timeless. But this may be considered semantics. It's not the essentials, being in the world, and being towards death and thrownness, they're not essentials, because the essence of my being lies in my existence, but they are, Heidegger insists, enduring structures. Well, how general and how enduring are these structures? In the years, and even decades after being in time, a very funny thing happened. A flood of books was written about Dasein, but then addressed, so described, within the context of different parts of the world, within the context of different cultures. So a true series of Tintin books, Kuifje-reeks in Dutch, flooded the bookstores. Dasein in Africa, Dasein in Peru, Dasein in Tibet, Dasein in Japan. And these studies are real fun to read, And in fact, they should be considered to be contributions to cultural philosophical anthropology or existential anthropology. But still, the very occurrence of these books is significant. It shows that in other cultures, different nuances of existential analytics are presented. That is something to think about. Being in Time was meant to be, it has the impression that it's about Dasein all over the world. And still, although there's being towards death in every culture, but still some of the structures Heidegger names are quite differently understood in other parts of the world. Second, what happened to the question of being? This was, after all, the starting point of Being in Time. The focus on Dasein seems to have led Heidegger astray. So how to go from existential analytics back to the question of being? There's another problem in Being in Time. Also, there is the problem of the phenomenology of the they in Being in Time. For many, including Sartre, there was a hidden ethics in Being in Time. The choice between being authentic and being inauthentic is not just an existential description, but there is a hidden ethics. And you feel this also. When you read Being in Time, Heidegger insists that to be inauthentic is a positive choice. A positive choice. He just doesn't convince his readers. And after Being in Time, and still, you read all these books caused by Heidegger on authenticity. You have all these books on lifestyle and the art of living, Levenskunst, where everybody wants to be authentic, to realize yourself, self-realization, which was the goal of even Maslow's entire psychology, which was influenced by Heidegger, but he didn't understand it. We all want to be ourselves. Someone said, I'm not myself. That's not good. I want to be myself. But Heidegger had a bigger problem, because a philosophy of authenticity is just another misunderstanding of Being in Time. In fact, trying to be authentic, to remain authentic, is as such inauthentic. It denies your temporality. You can never be authentic. You might be authentic just for a moment, but you'll never find a lifestyle of authenticity. Ridiculous, ridiculous. Not just philosophically, but you'll find out it never works. Heidegger's bigger problem was whether the they can actually be broken, whether it can actually be traversed by individual Dasein in its susceptibility to anxiety and the courage of being towards death. Can this really be done, Heidegger asked himself. And is it solely a matter of individual Dasein? And more poignantly put, is this all one may expect from philosophy? Describing existential structures of possibility, with which the reader can start exploring, living his or her life. Already in the early lectures, so before publishing Being in Time, Heidegger calls philosophy gegenruinant, translated counter-fallenness. Philosophy as such is against fallenness. He is raging against the tendency to fall in sciences, in philosophy, against remaining entangled in the common sense of the day with its fixed set of opinions and self-indulgence. And then, remarkably, 2 years after Being in Time, Heidegger gives an entire course on boredom. Not anxiety was the fundamental disposition in Being in Time, the most crucial disposition. There are many moods: boredom, happiness, sadness, depression. There are many, many moods. But anxiety, according to Heidegger, which he takes from Kierkegaard, is the most crucial mood, because anxiety confronts us with nothingness and with being towards death. Now, all of a sudden, 2 years later, he gives this entire course on boredom. This focus on boredom is furthermore remarkable because this was 1929, which is the year, as some of you may know, of the Wall Street crash, Black Tuesday, which hit Germany more ferociously than most other European countries, because Germany had also paid restitution money for the calamities that World War I brought to the world. Unemployment and poverty were catastrophic in Germany. In the idiom of Being in Time, however, Heidegger writes, "Fear is all around, but there's no room for anxiety." That's still a bit Being in Time. And he proceeds, "Our whole existence is devoted to problem solving and crisis management. All we do is to alleviate our material worries and economic strains and pains, and the fight against poverty is all around. Everything and everybody is directed towards one goal," Heidegger writes, "to regain a carefree life." Now, maybe some of you, the extremely clever ones, will have some sudden association what's happening here. A carefree life. Why is that a very important word in the context of Heidegger's philosophy? There's the word care in carefree. And Heidegger said, the being of Dasein, our existence, all Heidegger's terms they all mean the same. Dasein means existence, means Mitsein, means being in the world, it's all the same. And then he also uses the word Sorge, care. Care is our projected thrownness, our throne projectedness, being usually entangled in the day. Everybody wants a carefree life. All the hustle and bustle of our lives is about fighting poverty and regaining wealth. But, Heidegger asks, to what ultimate aim? And he answers, to end up in a new poverty, in a new need. And he calls this the need of needlessness, der Not der Notlosigkeit. So everybody who's worried about money and wealth and trying to get this wealth ends up entangled in a very peculiar need, the need of needlessness. Indeed, a peculiar need, but Heidegger says we will only end up in the profound boredom of perpetually managing the manageable. That is what it's all about, what we're doing. But by doing so, we become oblivious to the predicament that true poverty is not the lack of food, shelter, and comfort. True poverty is the lack of being, our real being there, the destitution of being. Seinsarmut. Heidegger even repeated this in 1945. Germany was completely in ruins. And Heidegger writes, true poverty is the poverty that we have no being anymore. Therefore, Heidegger writes, philosophy must stir up, shake up, and provoke the focus on management and problem solving. It must provoke the attempt to improve our material conditions. Everything must falter, Heidegger writes. Es soll alles ins Wanken geraten. Philosophy must agitate and frighten us in order to force our Dasein to rise to the occasion of our being there, to understand its own projectedness instead of misunderstanding it as a homo economicus, being in poverty or being in wealth. That is one-dimensional man, as Marcuse would describe it later. Well, to many critics, this line of reasoning was just in line with Heidegger's being short, be it short, but lasting, but he did it, affiliation with the National Socialist movement. Heidegger was also fascinated with Hitler's agitating speeches, so there's something very weird and tacky about this whole thing. But the more important thing is that Heidegger says philosophy has to do more. Philosophy is not about describing reality, it's not describing our being in the world. Philosophy has to do with also what is happening to us now. What is happening to us now, this poverty of being that we're only trying, and this is what we're still doing all the time, this is what this class is really all about, that we only in one dimension of prosperity or either poverty, we try to be on the side of wealth, we try to be on the side of a nice, happy, Kierkegaardian aesthetic life. This is in fact what we're all doing. So Heidegger is questioning his own time now. So Heidegger, this is the important thing, is rethinking being and time by focusing on epochal temporality, no longer on existential temporality. So what is happening? Instead of existential analytics, which was about individual being in the world, Heidegger explores the possibility of an epochal analytics. This comes from the word epoch, era, not to be confused with the phenomenological epoche of Husserl. That's a Greek word which means refraining from judgment. That's not it. It's epoch. It's from era, the time. In ordinary language, Heidegger seems to try to depict the spirit of his time. He tries to find out what the Zeitgeist is, the Tijdgeest. But to avoid existential analysis, and he doesn't want to give a diagnosis or count symptoms. That's not what Heidegger is all about. This is true philosophy. So Heidegger speaks of the way that being reveals itself in our time. He asks what constellation of being and mankind is happening to us. Something is happening to us. How can we think this? How can we even approach it? What does this mean? So it's a new line of questioning, asking about our own constellation of being and time. Foucault, who was deeply influenced by Heidegger, would later coin the idiom of an ontology of the present. So philosophy should be an ontology of the present. And if you're an academic, schooled in academics, that was the time that everybody said, as they did, Heidegger said, that's ridiculous, that's stupid, that can't be. Ontology is about lasting, essential structures of being. That is what ontology is all about. How could there be an ontology of the present? That is an impossible thing. But it may be impossible, academically speaking, but it's something we have to try to do.
There is a big elephant in the room once again. The elephant has been periodically returning into the room and then walking out, and we've been kind of addressing him a little bit. But of course, there is a mention of National Socialism. Yeah. It's not a secret of Heidegger's much discussed engagement. And we once again, I think, mutually ask for your patience, dear listener, because we once again are not really going to go too deep into it for the sake of trying to allow his philosophy to breathe and to try to engage with it sincerely before engaging with the historical facts, which is very necessary also. And for now, I think what could be interesting to mention is to mention explicitly that it has not been ignored. There is a big part of scholarship on Heidegger, and books upon books and articles are being written specifically trying to think through Heidegger's association with the National Socialist Party.
Yeah.
And just how separable or inseparable the foundations of his philosophy are from that. So before discussing it more, we just so that maybe it's a good thing to give you the context about just how lively this discussion is, and how many bright minds are engaging with it currently, very, very actively.
Yeah, people take this very seriously, as they should.
Yeah,
really, as they should. We will come back to this in a future episode. However, for now, we've decided to let the philosophy as it is breathe.
Yeah, but it is, the next episode.
It is the next episode. Yeah.
And sort of, it ties to this a little bit. Awee highlights that, a part of the motivation for the turn is this realization that came up about Dasein really being understood differently all around the world, and this universality that he strived for actually kind of crumbling a little bit.
And also in making it more close to therefore making it closer to philosophical anthropology, that it is trying to just study the human. Yeah. Whilst what Heidegger is doing, or attempts to do in Sein und Zeit, in Being and Time, is to actually start asking the question of being. And from the asking the genuine question of being, I think there is another, well, not an elephant in the room, but definitely something that is remarkable. Well, that really catches the ear, so to say.
Yeah, I agree.
The Heidegger's definition of true poverty, which is not the lack of shelter or food, but the lack of being.
Yeah.
I think we instinctively we both had a very different reaction to this.
Yeah, and I think because I'm less of a Heidegger scholar, I dare to say mine is probably a more common reaction. It's a crazy thing to hear, right? That's the least charitable way of interpreting it is, of course, to come across kind of as, well, you come across immediately as being extremely detached from the realities of material hardship, right? Because, saying that, true poverty is not when you are unhoused or you don't know if you can eat dinner today. It's really, it's the lack of being, which sounds crazy. But we've discussed this. I know this is not the way to read it.
No, I mean, that's not how I read it, and how I don't think that is meant that way.
I mean, me neither. But this is it's difficult to not go there.
No, I understand, and I a few years ago for a student magazine, I was writing a very short piece on housing, and I used the text by Heidegger, a building dwelling thinking. In which he also expands on that there was a housing crisis, and he said, well, the real housing crisis is not the lack of housing, but we kind of forgot how to dwell, how to reside, how to build. and that also, in that short piece, I also wrote a sentence according to the lines of, this is clearly written by someone who lives very, very comfortably. Yeah. Like, this is not someone who is desperately looking for a house. Yeah. At the time, I was living at my partner's place because I was homeless. Yeah. Yeah. So I was kind of frustrated with that. Well, homelessness is not the problem. The problem is that we don't know how to dwell. Yeah. And there is this first gut instinct that says, "Oh, come on." Mm-hmm. But actually, the thing that ties this all together, there are a lot of things that Heidegger says, which are all provocative in nature. Like, if you really follow his line of thinking and you understand what he really means, and what he's trying to move towards, that is really interesting. And that is really fundamental, because if it is about dwelling, about living somewhere, residing in a house, the thing is that you also have to build places that are actually built with the people and the surroundings in the back of your mind, not just dump some shelter somewhere in a field and see who salutes. It's really about trying to think through how to build and how to build places that are meant for people to dwell in. And this is the same with being. You could argue, and this is how I would read it. I'm not sure if this is the correct or the supposed way to read it. But if the true poverty, like not understanding being, then everything that we decide to do is like build on quicksand. Yeah. Because we have never really thoroughly worked through the foundations. And then you can try to solve everything with the solution to the problem, the quick solution that you see to the problem before you, or you can really try to think through the question that is asked and see if maybe the roots are part of the problem, or is rooted into part of the problem. Yeah, and in that sense, the entire way of thinking about being needs to be altered before this true poverty, the symptoms of the poverty, can be thoroughly solved.
I mean, it is undoubtable that the structure, it's difficult to argue with the thing that the foundations and the structures must change before, to securely, in this materialistic sense, resolve the things that keep coming up with, of course, the homelessness crisis and the housing crisis in general. But of course, it's also sometimes can be quite difficult to accept such a non-material way of some immaterial way of thinking about it.
Sure. Right? Yeah. No. Yeah.
But in any case, even though it's difficult, lately I've been thinking a lot about, and this, about how we don't. Well, that I've been thinking about this, how we don't read enough fascists, and that is actually and how it is a bad thing actually.
Yeah. No, I agree.
It's very. I've always had a guttural reaction to just really not engage with it by acquainting myself with it. But I think it's very clear the world we live in, and I've been thinking a lot about Carl Schmitt, a Nazi, way less ambiguous than Heidegger, which we'll talk about Heidegger, way less ambiguous. Schmitt was like a straightforward ideologue. But there is so much to learn from his thinking on sovereignty, precisely the thing that I think we might be lacking because we don't engage with it. So this is just to try to convince maybe any listeners who are also finding themselves to feel in a more stubborn way. I feel you, and I am, and I've been, and I have that strong instinct as well. But I hope you can be convinced to open your mind to seeing what you can get from it.
Yeah, and also in general, I think if such a sentence like the true poverty is poverty of being, like sometimes people just say straight out offensive things, and then that you can take them as offensive things. But if you find certain of these sentences like very provoking or almost offensive in nature, but it's not immediately clear why, that is the perfect place to start doing philosophy. Yeah. Because what's the problem with the sentence? What is meant? What is the problem, and why do you disagree? That is, if you do that thoroughly and with patience, you are doing philosophy. I like these kind of polemic sentences. Anyway.
Deleuze said that if you are close to a screen, you're also almost close to a philosophy.
There you go. There you go.
Thank you, Petit Gilles.
Yeah, and with
Petit
that...
et grand,
Petit et grand. Yeah, and I guess with that, now that we've once again defended and as much as we can and went on our little tangent, it's time to go back and learn about the epoch analytics.
To reach this epochal analytics, because Heidegger doesn't just want to write about his own time, he does a different thing. He tries to destructure Western philosophy. He already did that in Being and Time by reminding of the battle of the giants concerning being in pre-Socratic philosophy, which has waned still since then. He destructured the three prejudices concerning the question of being. So he already did this in Being and Time, but he's now doing it towards the entire history of Western philosophy. I will give two different approaches of Heidegger's epochal analytics. First, in What is Philosophy? In 1950, Heidegger contemplates on the different fundamental attunements, moods, dispositions of Western philosophy itself. This is a very strange approach. Writing the history of philosophy is usually just describing the positions of all these different philosophers. That's what we do in academics. It's very boring, but this is what we do. Heidegger says, no, there is something else going on. There are different attunements, moods, dispositions. He already wrote about this in Being and Time on an individual scale. Every individual Dasein is always in a certain mood. The world is always disclosed in certain moods. In anxiety, the world, it falls apart. In boredom, the world is just a massive gray, colorless, significant non-thing. In happiness, the world is full of colors and opportunities. So the world appears in many different ways, in different attunements, in different dispositions. But this also goes for the history of philosophy. Furthermore, the history of philosophy shows a discontinuous, not teleological, discontinuous, and I will show you that it's quite convincing what Heidegger is doing, a discontinuous succession of moods. And so we may be in one mood now. This is the great question that we have, the ontology of the present. What is our current mood? And also, and this is very important, and you're young and you're going to hopefully, I will be dead by then, but you will maybe come in that. There will be moods, future moods that we don't even know about. Completely different moods, I hope so, because I don't really like the mood that we're in. Well, let's make it technical now. Let's look at the Greek philosophy. Let's look at Greek culture. What was the fundamental mood of Greek thinking? What was the mood? What made them, what was the attunement? What made them think? You can find it in Plato, you can find it in Aristotle, so I'm not making this up. Philosophy, Greek philosophy, is in the mood of wonder. Plato says literally, philosophy begins with wonder. Aristotle agrees. Philosophy begins with wonder, and he adds the joys of perception. So wonder. Now then we ask, okay, if you're in wonder, what is truth if you're in wonder? This is difficult, so I'll give the answer. According to Heidegger, Heidegger said, I don't have to ask what is truth. The Greek gave me the word. The Greek word for truth, and this is crucial for this entire course, the Greek word for truth is aletheia. Aletheia, so a privative, alpha privatissimum, aletheia. Lethe is the river of forgetfulness, of death, of hiddenness. Aletheia is, a word I've already used, unconcealment. That's excellent translation of aletheia. Truth is unconcealment to the Greeks. And the world, to the Greeks, things in Greek philosophy appear as a variety of unconcealments. Reality is a patchwork of unconcealments. Of course, Plato tried to solve that problem by positing the ideal world, but our world, the world we live in, is a configuration of unconcealment. And it's very important that the Greek used the word for aletheia. This is why Heidegger says only the Greeks and the Germans can think. Because what did the Romans do? They translated aletheia with veritas. And just by choosing that word, they lost everything. That's when everything went wrong. So the Romans could, just because they changed that word, they choose that word, lost the sensibility for what truth is really about. Truth is about unconcealment. Now, I'm not saying, maybe I'm a bit too Heideggerian now, because it would be stupid and wrong. This would be thinking in terms of originality and ultimate things. That would be metaphysics, that the Greeks have really done the only right thing. That's not what I'm trying. I shouldn't say that. I think it, but I shouldn't say it. It's enough to say there was some time when we were susceptible, that when we were talking about truth, that we would consider truth to be unconcealment. For us now, truth is the adequatio intellectuis ad re. Truth is the correspondence or the adequacy of our thoughts with reality. This is all science. Science has made truth to become something very narrow, something which only counts for propositions. We've lost the enormous wealth of what truth is about, and in fact, in normal languages, we still use the word true and truth in a very non-scientific sense, which in fact surpasses science and tells us that science is not really doing the important thing. I hope that you will all, each and every one of you, will find true love. Now, true love is not the adequatio intellectus ad re. It's real. It's the unconcealment of your love. So there's something happening in Greek thinking, but let's make it simple. This is just what happened in a certain epoch of Greek culture, where wonder was the fundamental disposition, where truth was aletheia, and where reality was a configuration of things. And then we ended up, I'm making some jumps, but in the Middle Ages, Christian philosophy. In Christian philosophy, in Christian thinking, Christian culture. Just imagine, and I hope you don't even have to imagine, being religious. What is truth? What brings you truth if you're religious? You go to Revelation. Faith and revelation. So what is the world? What are things if you're religious, to a religious person? What are things? It's a configuration of unconcealments? No. The world is ens creatum. The world is created by God. Everything is created by God. Look, I'm not giving a sermon here. I find that myself sounding like I'm doing a sermon. This is one way of looking at the reality, which is a very respectable way of looking at reality. In faith, you have a revelation, and then you find out that the whole world is not a patchwork of unconcealments. It is ens creatum, made by God. But then, in modernity, we have Descartes, and now it becomes very difficult because Descartes' mood, you might say, is doubt. Doubting everything. That is the mood. And Heidegger says, no, that's not true. If you read Descartes very well, he knew exactly, before he started his meditations, he knew exactly where he would end up. He knew exactly what would happen. He never really doubted anything. He knew that when he was doubting, he would realize the absolute convincing situation of being in doubt, thinking, and ending up with the cogito ergo sum. The fundamental mood of modernity, our time, or the beginning of our time, because we are in postmodern times. But modernity, the fundamental mood is trust. Self-confidence, even. Trust. Self-confidence and trust that we can understand the world. So, because what is truth in our, not in our time, in modernity? What is true? When do we call something when do we think we can speak of truth? When it is... That's the thought itself. When it's certain. Truth is certainty. This is what you're teaching right now. This is what Erasmus University is telling you. Truth is certainty, certain knowledge. It's not a revelation. If you think it's a revelation, better stop your studies. If you think it's Aletheia, no room for you here at Erasmus. We have different values, which all boil down to that we believe in certainty. And things are only things if they are measurable, if we can be absolutely clear and certain about them. So ens certum. The world is not ens creatum, the world is ens certum. And it takes a rather unnuanced person who would say, well, I consider this a progress. I wouldn't say so. There's wonder, and there's faith, and then completely unexpected, there's solid trust. And then we come to our age. And Heidegger struggles. Heidegger asks, in what disposition, in what attunement do we find ourselves today?
Okay, so after, I think, 5 lectures and also for us 11 episodes, I think it's an interesting revelation maybe that finally the origins of unconcealment are properly explained.
Yeah, unconcealment has been invoked.
Yes. And since the first episode and the first lectures, but I think you don't need this explanation to understand what it has been throughout. So it's not like, oh, finally we now get it.
Yeah.
But it is, I really enjoyed listening back to these lectures and now really seeing aletheia, the Greek word for unconcealment, which replaces the idea of truth as veritas, as something static that is true. I really enjoyed like listening back to this and kind of realizing I think this is the first proper introduction of this phrase that has been used throughout the lectures.
So it's been the Greeks all along.
It's been the Greeks all along. But what I really like about this is that both you see how it could have been applied throughout the lectures anyway. It also kind of prepares anyone that engages with these lectures to already have an understanding of what it is building towards. You have seen multiple examples of aletheia. Like the field we've talked about, like the different ways in which the field can be experienced, can be seen, the different modes of unconcealment. Yeah. It's nice to have a podcast special, completely like it's rounded off. We have now, it has been introduced, and now we also know. Yeah,
it's kind of like when Awee first mentioned throughout the lecture the phrase "first philosophy."
Yeah.
Big
moment.
Yeah.
Big moment. No, but I really, without making too much fun about it, it's a really, I think this is one of the most interesting ideas that I picked up on when I was a first-year student. I think this really stuck with me. That aletheia. I think that I could never have written my bachelor thesis if this didn't really stick out for me during these lectures.
Okay, I didn't know.
That is the fact that the poet can also bring forth into unconcealment that which is around us in a completely different way than science does. That really put me on the path that I'm still walking down.
Yeah, another path that Heidegger has paved or maybe started is, of course, an interesting word, destructuring, has been invoked, which is painfully close to something that, once again, everyone may be the most used and well-known concept
and
misused concept from postmodern philosophy, aka deconstruction, famously coined by Derrida. But of course, deconstruction destructuring. There is a clear link here.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, deconstruction, when it was first used by Derrida, was merely a translation of the German destruction, the Destruction, by Heidegger. And Derrida, the concept definitely developed over time and became something that is distinct from what Heidegger was doing. But the destruction, not in the sense of destroying or annihilating, but like picking apart the strands and retracing the structure, and also retracing like meanings that something did have, and now no longer carry with, or maybe carry with, which we are no longer attuned to.
Yeah, genealogy, as Foucault would say. Yeah.
Another thinker greatly influenced by this line of thinking. It is an interesting path to see that happening here. And as already mentioned, it was already present in Sein und Zeit, but it becomes more present throughout his work, I think.
Yeah.
Talking about annihilating.
Yeah, I really wanted to... so we haven't really... Awee hasn't invoked him yet, but we're going to talk about Nietzsche a little bit. And once again, this is only taking a little part of the lecture and does not mean that Nietzsche is not uber influential. But I think a very good thing to keep in mind when one is trying to engage with Nietzsche is, I think he is one of the most misappropriated, misunderstood, misinterpreted philosophers. Famously was extremely opposed to Hitlerian ideology, and then eventually completely appropriated by the ideology for its own sake.
Yeah.
And this is something in a less extreme way maybe, but I think this is something that still keeps being regurgitated. Awee doesn't do it, but of course Nietzsche is invoked with nihilism here, and the common way of misrepresenting, I think, or misreading or not engaging with his work enough is to read Nietzsche as being an apologist or a promoter of nihilism, or being a nihilist himself. And I think it's good to keep in mind that he wasn't. He criticized, he's a thinker of nihilism, but he's not a nihilist.
In a way, he diagnosed
Yeah.
our culture with nihilism.
Yeah.
It's the same way of saying that your doctor who diagnoses you with cancer is pro that cancer.
Exactly.
Wild. Okay.
Yeah, and I think if you have already decided or framed that Nietzsche is a nihilist, that would be incorrect. But if you have done so, everything you read of him could be viewed in that light.
Absolutely.
And if you are aware of it, and that is why we now treat it before Awee is talking about Nietzsche, if you are aware that Nietzsche is not in favor of nihilism, or not arguing for nihilism, then his philosophy becomes something more interesting, more rich, and also more challenging. When I try to, sometimes people don't even accept the fact that he was not a nihilist. If you have like a conversation, this is usually conversations past midnight, somewhere in a bar, someone finding out you study philosophy and then hounding you with need for clarifications about a plethora of topics.
Or as I said, what's your philosophy?
What's your philosophy?
Yeah.
And then, no, but Nietzsche was a nihilist, right? Then, no, he wasn't. No, well, but he would. No, but no. And there is this aphorism in the Gay Science in which he says something according to the lines of, "You cannot destroy anything without creating something else. You have to create something to put in its place.
Yeah.
You can like tear things down and build things up, fine, but you cannot just destroy." Which I think is a good thing to keep in mind when it comes to Nietzsche and nihilism.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a small primer before Awee takes the floor.
Yeah.
And we talk about Heidegger and Nietzsche.
What is our disposition? Heidegger hesitates. He says, I don't know. I'm in this disposition. Even Foucault addresses that. The ontology of the present is a very difficult, even Hegel knew this. He says philosophy is its time captured in thoughts. He doesn't use the word concepts. This is very technical, you don't have to remember this, but we philosophers are honest enough to realize it. It's very difficult to write about your own time. It's very difficult because you're involved in it, completely entangled in it. But Heidegger asked some questions. Is it anxiety? He addressed that in Being and Time, and there might be good reasons to say it's anxiety, because Heidegger uses anxiety as a fundamental disposition, but in Nietzsche's The Madman, the fragment of the gay science, it's the experience of nihilism. God is dead. There is that is a very desperate experience if you read the text, and you've studied it and I believe in the seminars. Aren't we perpetually falling backward, sideward, forward in all directions? Yeah, with what water could we purify ourselves? It's a directful experience, nihilism. So you might say, if we're living in the era of nihilism, we are living in the era of deep anxiety. But you might also argue, I would, that we are living in the era of boredom. We are living in a strange era where all we want is a nice, happy life. Think of Kierkegaard's aesthetic stage, which is not about enjoyment only. It's about success, it's about fame, it's about attention, it's about acknowledgement. That's all we want, that's all we want. But is there really, really something happening? John Lennon once said, there's always something happening, but nothing going on. And with happening, he doesn't mean the event or the arriveness, but there's always something happening, something that we pay all this attention. This is what Heidegger called the curiosity, the Neugier. We're always going from this news to that news to that news. Every day there's a new thing that we're so completely worried about or enthusiastic about, and then it fades away. It's just... Nietzsche spoke of us. Nietzsche spoke of us in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And he calls us the last men and women, and of course every gender choice in between and beyond that. We are the last men and women. And this is what Zarathustra writes. I tell you, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. I tell you, you still have chaos in yourself. Alas, 1860s. Huh? There comes a time when man will no longer give birth to any star. There comes the time of the most despicable man and woman who can no longer despise himself. That's us. I show you the last man. What is love? What is creation? What is longing? What is a star? So asked the last man, and he blinks. Knipogen, he blinks. The earth has become small, and on it hops the last man, who makes everything small. His species is eradicable as the flea. The last man lives longest. We have discovered happiness, say the last man, and they blink. A little poison now and then that makes for pleasant dreams, and much poison at the end for a pleasant death. They have their little pleasures for the day and their little pleasures for the night, but they have a regard for health. We have discovered happiness, say the last man, and they blink. So this might be one way of tangling this question, and I'm not saying that boredom is our fundamental disposition. It may be anxiety, it may be boredom, it may be something else. It's very difficult to say so. But we're approaching a new field of phenomenology here, trying to describe what shows itself to ourselves. Also, and in many ways, because boredom and anxiety are just moods that are there, but still, and in extreme way, we are still attuned by a firm and solid trust in our search for certainty, control, efficiency. Yeah? This is still the way we think. We are still partly modern. We still believe in the Enlightenment. We still believe in rationality. We believe in science. We believe that we should always strive for certainty, for control, for efficiency. This is our paradigm. In fact, this idiom of Kuhn on the structure of scientific revolutions, paradigm, he got this from Heidegger's Epochal Analytics, where Heidegger describes certain modes of thinking in which a certain mood and a certain concept of truth is there, and then it's, for reasons that are very difficult to really trace or explain, it goes to another paradigm or another epochal understanding of. Foucault would later coin this episteme. So many thinkers are doing this, trying to understand Western history not as a succession of different positions, but as a shift in moods, shift of dispositions, a shift of paradigms, episteme. You will come to this during your study in many, many other classes. So we are still in this paradigm of the search for certainty. At the same time, we don't really know what certainty is. And there's also this nagging mood of anxiety, of despair, of boredom, which is also there. So there's something, this is one way of doing epochal analytics. The other one is, the second strategy is based exactly on this idiom of Nietzsche in the fragment on the madman, an article called by Heidegger called Nietzsche's Word, God is Dead. And in this essay, Heidegger says, well, Nietzsche has shown that most Western philosophies are onto-theologies. They are metaphysics. And Nietzsche proclaims himself to be the end of all these metaphysical positions. And even Nietzsche himself said there is a successive decrease in the status and the imagery and the metaphysical status of this ideal absolute world, and how the true world became a fable. But Heidegger follows Nietzsche here. And let's just look at it. It's very remarkable. There's something strange happening, although there's something even stranger happening as well. This is a strange, well, not strange. Plato came with the world of ideas. Absolutely strange to us. The world of ideas is the true world. Then Aristotle coined, as the most fundamental being, the unmoved mover. I hope you feel a little bit, not really, that we're getting closer to ourselves. Unmoved mover, you know, I wouldn't know the address, but an unmoved mover, that rings more bells to me than an ideal world which is absolutely shut off from me, because as long as I live, I will never have any connection to that real world. Then the unmoved mover turned into metaphysical thinking, to God, which is also our Father, our Creator. You feel what's happening? We're getting closer to ourselves. Because after the authority of God, and I don't mean this in a misdemeanory way, there's the authority of the church. The church is what really is the highest entity. And when the Enlightenment really struck, Enlightenment struck, lightning, oh, you like that. There was reason. Reason is the highest order of ontology. Not the world of ideas, not unmoved mover, not God, not church. Reason. And after reason, the first man, the last man are already born. No, not really born, but they were coming. It's happiness, personal happiness. Utilitarianism, very important. So we don't like to admit that this really is what we're all doing. Utilitarianism, socialism, liberalism, capitalism. These are the religions of today. And then there's nihilism, the last man. The world's become flat. Yep. Something else happening. The real thing is The real thing to realize, Heidegger says, is that nihilism is not, as Nietzsche said, the end of metaphysics. We all would say that. That's the end of metaphysics. For all these ages, there was metaphysics, and now nihilism was always there from the start. Nihilism has always been there. We've only have denied it. All we have been doing is denying nihilism, escaping nihilism by inventing a supernatural world. Plato invented the supernatural world of the ideas because he wanted to fight the sophists around him or whatever was in his mind when he did it. And I think he was quite sincere. I even believe that, I'm convinced that Plato would really, if I would talk to Plato now, he would say, no, this is not my conviction. No, this is really true. Just like Descartes would say, no, the cogito, reason, that's really in the highest instance. No, nihilism is the hidden ground of the entire history of Western philosophy. Franz Kafka, some of his books are also on my list, he wrote, "For many, many ages, metaphysics has mercifully painted and decorated the empty sky. But now, for us today, the paint has corroded, flaked, and withered." So here we are now in a world with no ultimate eschatological goals, no ultimate meaning, no ultimate truth, nothing forever, nothingness forever, as Nietzsche said it. Nihilism is the experience that our world is just an insignificant speck in an indifferent universe. And Nietzsche tried to think this through. And he came with the intuition that all there is will to power, which is in fact there are only colliding forces. Reality is nothing more than this, with no meaning, with no intention, no goal, nothing. It's just forces colliding. He called this will to power. It sounds a bit metaphysical, will to power, as if power is the highest instance. Heidegger saw this in Nietzsche. He said Nietzsche is still a metaphysical thinker. Because Nietzsche said, I'm anti-Plato. I'm the reversal of Plato. Well, if you're the reversal of Plato, Heidegger says you're still tied to it. You're still tied to if you're anti-something, you're still tied to it. An atheist is very much connected to religion and God. So Nietzsche is struggling. He speaks about the eternal recurrence of the same. This is what happens. The eternal recurrence of the same. There's no progress. Nothing is getting better. But he also says we must attempt a re-evaluation of all values. Umwertung aller Werte. That's still utopian thought. Umwertung aller Werte. Still values. Values is a metaphysical concept. And Nietzsche tries to talk about the Übermensch, the kind of people that are really capable of embracing their fate, their amor fati. It's a utopian anthropological thought. So Heidegger says there's a bit too much metaphysics still in Nietzsche. I'm going to do something else, he said. And I'm not saying that Heidegger is right and Nietzsche is wrong, not at all. But Heidegger says, what if we would consider the eternal recurrence of the same to be the perpetual manifestation and manipulation of all beings in the era of technology? What if that would be the eternal occurrence of the same that Nietzsche has proclaimed and predicted? That all we are doing in the era of technology, because this is the ontology of the present, really gets a name here. We're in the era of technology, modern technology even. We are in the era of technology, Heidegger says, in which everything we do is to manipulate beings technologically. Eternal occurrence of the same. There's no real goal. Heidegger even says technology is nihilism in practice. So he's trying to make very tangible what Nietzsche is talking about. Here we enter the question whether Heidegger is a philosopher of technology. He is not. But for philosophy of technology, Heidegger is one of the most important inspirations. No matter how difficult his text is, but I'll guide you through it. he is one of the most important players. Scharf and Dussek, who published a huge book with all the most important primary texts on technology. In their introduction, they say Heidegger is the single most influential position in the field. So take this to build up some encouragement and some courage, because after the break we're going to read the question concerning technology, which seems a very difficult text, but is in fact not that hard, and it is very, very important.